Hey everyone, glad to see y'all today. Oh my goodness. Okay, so here's my pledge to you. If you will help me watch the clock, you are free to get up and walk out. All right, yeah, even now. Listen, there are already people sitting in the sanctuary.
How many?
Oh, about 15 or 20. Yeah. And I will tell you, it's much cooler in there than it is in here, thank God. Right? I'm going to make sure we're done by 10:30. We're going to be done. Everything done by 10:30.
You need the water?
No. I'm just going to forge on with this. So, since we have just a brief amount of time today, I didn't want to start a new study again today, but I wanted to ask, I have a topic for us to discuss, but before we do that, I want to see, were there any unresolved comments from last week? Remember last week we were talking about this whole notion of this interview I had done with George about how is his character in this drama here changed over the 33 years, and I was asking y'all how you have changed over your lifetime and how you have developed and maybe your thoughts or theology or beliefs have changed. And I just we sort of ran out of time and I had to shut it down. And I want to ask, did anyone else have something you want to add to that? Because I didn't want to leave us undone on that.
You think we remember that far back?
Okay.
That's a really good question, and I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember it. Well, that's a good segue.
How do you view this? Is it YouTube or
Oh,
your interview with George?
Oh, it's on YouTube. Yeah. It's in the tapestry. In fact, is it printed in the tapestry today? There's a transcript of it in the tapestry.
Wow.
But if you want to see it, you can watch so there's a video version. It's about a 25-minute interview.
Excellent interview.
Oh, thank you. It was fun to do. So this is a bit of a morbid topic on a happy day, but I want to couch it in happier terms.
Is it one of those dadgum poems?
No, I'm not reading any poetry today. No poetry today. I want to talk for just a little bit of time and hear some conversation with y'all around a topic that we don't address as much as we ought to, and that is how to prepare for your own funeral. I told you this is morbid, but that's why we don't talk about it, right? And Chad, I'm glad you're here today, because Chad, as a hospital chaplain, is dealing with this every day of the week that he's working, and sometimes multiple days. And most of y'all know that I have a side hustle as a funeral preacher. From Friday to Monday this weekend, I'm doing 5 funerals.
Wow.
All for people who have no church affiliation and have no minister to call upon, right? So I was having this conversation with our surrogate grandkids next door. The oldest of them had today's her 9th birthday, and they had a big party yesterday. And so the grandparents are up from Houston. And Friday night we were out in the front yard and we were talking about this with them. And one of the grandfathers said, "Yeah, I've got this." He just said to everyone there, "I've got this folder in the safe in the house." His name is Bird. He said, and it's labeled "Bird is dead." And it's got everything in there you need to know. But he hadn't really thought about some of the stuff that I was raising, about how we remember people. And you've heard me say this before, and I've written about this before, and I will probably write about it again. I am astonished when I talk to family members of the deceased, and I ask them to tell me about their loved one. They cannot tell me the most basic information about them. They have been their mother or father their entire lives, and these are adult people. And, well, where was she born? Well, I think it was somewhere in Oklahoma. what kind of work did she do? Well, she worked for the school district, but I'm not really sure what she did. I hear this all the time. Now, I know none of y'all are like this, but the message here that I want to start with is the importance of having these kinds of conversations with your family before you're on hospice, right? So important. It's not that you have to plan out your funeral service in graphic detail. I mean, some people want to do that, right? I attended one of those services a few weeks ago. President Wood, some of y'all know that name, he was a longtime editor of the Baptist Standard before Toby Drew and before Marv Knox. And President had been a pastor in West Texas before, and he was in his 90s, he was 91, I think, when he died. And he had his entire service planned out for 20 years. Well, some of the people he wanted to speak were no longer able to speak, except from the grave. But he nominated our alternates, and so that all worked, but he had it down to the hymns that we were going to sing and the verses that were read and all of that. You don't have to, I'm not saying you have to do that. But I do think it is important as you think about your life to communicate to people around you what is important to you and what your values are. And that can be an entire range of things, from what your spiritual beliefs are to how you think you spent your life. I just cannot emphasize enough the oddity of talking to an adult daughter or son of someone who's died, and it's a 5-minute conversation. Well, did they have any hobbies? Well, not that I know of. Would you describe them? Well, they were just a loving grandparent. Well, can you give me some examples of that? Well, they were a loving grandparent. Right? You've heard these?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I just don't want any of you to come to the end of life, this mortal life, and have your family and friends not be able to say something about you. So how do you solve this? Well, there's several ways, and look, we can talk about these. One of the most lovely things, and some of y'all have done this already, is to take the time, particularly if you're retired and have some time to do this, even in a simple way, write out your life story. Just write it down, because that will be a tremendous gift to your children and your grandchildren and to those who come behind. It's a tremendous gift. My father, after he retired, before he got lung cancer and died, sat at the little computer at their house, and it was his project for weeks to just sort of write out his life story with stuff I never knew, because he was the youngest of 9 children raised in West Texas and eastern New Mexico during the Depression. His mother died when he was 4. His sisters raised him. And there's details in there I had never heard, because I honestly didn't know most of his family. I never met most of them. And what seems common knowledge to you is not going to be common knowledge to your children and grandchildren. And Jim, I know you've done the same thing with trying to officiate a funeral when you just don't have much information. And the reason this matters is anytime we mark someone's homegoing, yes, it needs to be a mourning, yes, it needs to be celebration, it needs to be both of those things, but it needs to be a time for us to give thanks to God for who this person was and all they did, right? Which may have been unseen. Now, don't let humility stop you on this. Jim?
Well, that's been the main thing. I think of my dad. There were so many things I didn't know about my dad. Even still, I don't know. But he wasn't one to sit there and say, by the way, let me tell you about when I was working on a railroad, or whenever I was doing this or that. Same thing with his father. He wouldn't stop to talk about it. We would have to find out from other ways, because he wouldn't talk about himself. So in the same way, I'm not sharing a lot of things about myself to others,
Right.
lest I see the eyes rolling going,
Right.
"Oh, God," you know. So no one wants that. So how do we?
Write it down,
That's the only way around.
or
it,
leave
I
a
guess,
video, or leave a tape, or somehow. Okay, let's Trish.
The most important thing, another important thing is do a video so that your children, grandchildren can hear your voice. And look at your expression,
Yeah.
look at your eyes, look at your smile.
Yes.
Because when you write it down, they don't see any of that. I'd give anything if I had that of my husband. They had done it to his own mother, which was fascinating. They wrote a list of questions.
Right.
The kids said, how did you meet? What'd you do? What happened then? That they wanted to know, and she answered them. We never did that with Chuck. Of course, he never thought he was dying, but
Right.
do it.
Well, none of us ever think we're dying.
No.
Right, so for those at home, Trish has this wonderful idea, suggestion for real life, make a video, because your children, grandchildren, and those to come can not only read or hear your words, but they can see your face and know who you are. And this is a tremendous thing. Yeah, technology may change, but it can get transferred. One of my own greatest regrets, having been, I'm an only child, I was very close to my parents, but there are so many things I understand now that they're gone that I never knew and I never asked, that if I had thought about it more, I would have done I'm an interviewer. I'm a journalist. This is what I do for a living. I never did such a thing with them. I could have recorded this very thing, and it never occurred to me till they were gone. Okay, here and then here.
One of the things I have in mind, I've made a little bit of progress on this, but not much yet. I'm gonna write out a sermon for a funeral, for my funeral. And in traditional Baptist form, it's gonna have 3 points in the poem, except I can't find
Okay,
the poem.
don't tell Ann about the poem.
I don't read poetry, so I can't.
Yeah.
I'm looking for that.
Okay, that's cool. Yes.
When I was in college, I was taking a class called, it was a sociology class, sociology of the aging, and we were given a task to go to do a family timeline, sort of, and this is before DNA DNA existed, we just didn't.
Right.
But anyway, I took a trip to Stigler, Oklahoma, and I sat outside underneath the pecan tree with my grandmother, and I was one of the youngest grandchildren, and the Bellers don't reproduce. We wait every other, generation. But anyway, so she was pretty old at the time anyway, and I asked her these questions about how did she meet Granddaddy Beller, who I never knew. He had died when my dad was 19. And you realize that even though, anyway, there was a love story there that I couldn't conceive of between
Right.
these two people, and how they sort of, so that was one thing that was great. But I hear there's now a program out there that some people have been giving their parents and for a year.
Oh,
like
right,
every month,
right.
I
Do you
think
know about
ask
this,
a
Chad?
question.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of it.
But anyway, that might be
Yeah, you answer one question a day for a year.
something like that.
Right. It's
That might be a nice
yeah.
gift.
Does anyone know about
Yeah,
that?
but there's a book too that I gave my mother before she died. So I have stuff in her home handwriting, and it was asking her questions. How many children did you have? How many brothers? What was the best thing you did with children? It's just a whole bunch of questions you never even think about,
So there are multiple ways to do this, right? Lynette?
I just feel very blessed in that this is not necessarily an issue for my family, and I'll tell you a couple of stories, and I'll try to shut up. One is that my niece, who is in her early 30s now, gave my mother, her grandmother, a book like you're talking about. And my mother thinks it's the most wonderful thing in the world that she writes down something every day for Lily, who is named after her mother.
Right.
And that is one of the coolest things ever. My father died when I was 15, and our baby brother was 2 at that time, so he didn't know our dad. So we had to tell him stories about our father, and our father was very different from my stepdad. And after my stepdad died, all of the things that we had told him about our father, he began to kind of understand, because my mother became more like the woman that she was when she raised us. And so that's I thought that was very interesting. My mother used to be the one to write the obituaries for most of the people that died in our little community, you know? And so we always kind of knew that. There were family stories going around everywhere. And the coolest thing is my mom wrote a book. And it was probably one of the ways she talked about how you didn't know certain things about your parents.
Right.
It was something she talked about several things in that little book that I never knew about her. And she told us stories all of my life about how she met our dad and what happened and blah, 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 and how my grandmother and grandfather got together and everything. But when she wrote that little book, she talked about her oldest brother who got killed in the Korean War. And I never knew my Uncle Charles, but my Uncle Charles and my mother were like this. And he would write a letter home to his mom every week or so. And he would end it by saying something to the effect of, I leave you with a song on every something and a kiss on every wave. And it was absolutely the coolest thing in the whole wide world. And so we kind of have these stories and we tell family stories so that I hope at some point some of these things, I hope that they know a little bit about their sister. But I see really the importance of actually having written it down. I think sometimes we assume that people know us.
That's it,
They
Lynette.
don't always know
We
know.
assume people know who we are, right, Susan?
I think I found it one question a day in my life so far.
One question a day is the app
On Amazon.
on Amazon. And again, you just take a notepad if you want to, right? Chad.
Yeah, something we encourage in the hospital, one of the units I work on is our oncology unit, so people sometimes have time to prepare with
Right.
a cancer diagnosis, and whatever your age is, doing the videos, but for specific moments like high school graduation or wedding day, or that you anticipate you may miss because of your diagnosis or whatever, and so that's a great way.
Oh, that's
whether
lovely.
you're the grandparent, the parent, the spouse, whatever, of marking those moments of, I don't know if I'm gonna be here for my son's first day of school, but here's a video I'm gonna record ahead of time, with the advice I wanna give them or whatever. So the video thing is really good. And then just the other comment of something I, help people reflect on is we put so much thought into every other major life event, births and moves and graduations and, all these things, but we don't do it around death, just as you're highlighting. And so just normalizing that it's just another thing that we want to do well, just like we want to do well in all these other areas of life. Ending well is just as important.
Wow, that's beautiful, Chad. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Mark, this happened because when my mom passed away last year,
Right.
that also was the same year that my nephew was graduating high school. And one of the things that that really got him was like she was doing really good with her recovery from her surgery and everything, and he thought that she was physically going to be there. But when he did walk across the stage and everything, after the ceremony was over, and I went up to him, like, well, I know since your grandmother physically couldn't be here, but mentally she's around, and symbolically, he told me, yeah, I know that she's with me, because then when he unbuttoned his gown, he had her class ring wrapped on her cheek. I'm like, I know she's right here.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So there actually is. You're thinking this is supposed to be Bible study, right? And there's a verse for this. There's probably more than one, but the one I want to highlight is one of the Psalms, and it's a beautiful line. One generation shall laud your name or your praises to the next. And this is the reason I chose to talk about this today, is because we're in the mindset of generational change today here at Wilshire. This is a rare passing of the baton for us, right?
Yeah.
But it reminds us the importance of story in all of our lives. We are about telling the church's story right now. We're about telling the story of George's interaction with us. But let that be a reminder of the importance of telling our own story, because no matter how insignificant you think you are, someone else thinks you're very significant. More than someone else thinks you're very significant. And you would leave a tremendous legacy by explaining how your own life has been shaped by your faith and your family, by the community and by others. you may be someone who just doesn't normally talk about that, and that's okay. Leave it somehow for us. What's our time?
It's 10:20.
Okay.
My mom, about a year and a half before she passed away suddenly, very suddenly, had gone to a funeral home to check out some arrangements for things.
Right.
And they handed her and some funeral books, funeral planning guide.
Right.
And she sat there and she filled the thing out, what she wanted to wear, anything of the scriptures, anything to be read, hymns to be sung, all the life history of where she was born, all of her transitions through life, and even down to, she added things in there saying, tell my boys to read 1st and 2nd Timothy, in there. And then she also wrote a quote of her own, tell my boys to not be afraid of life. I don't know what that, but it makes sense. But I think she saw that in Dad and knew that it would be passed on. So there were things in there, and I thought, wow, those are things that I've Xeroxed it off and framed them and things like that. But it was such a gift to us. She did it to Dad too, and Dad was had to be hogtied to give up some of this information, but we used it again later.
Right.
Of course, for him too.
Yeah.
But
It
was
really
such
does
a
matter.
gift to us, and we could use that in so many ways.
Right. Yeah.
All through life.
For sure. Yes.
My mother died in December, and so we're going to have a memorial in October. I found on a piece of cardboard how she feels spiritually in her relationship with God. She never shared any of this with anybody. We never knew. So now I can tell the family members that are not Christian or not related with the church, this is how your grandmother felt. She really had a faith that we never knew. It was the coolest thing.
So this is a wonderful story. It's a great way to close this segment. Her mother died recently, right? Do you have a comment?
Yeah.
Hang on one second.
Yeah.
So for those at home, and afterward you found written out on a piece of cardboard?
A cardboard, it was just stuck in something.
There was stuck somewhere, a sort of a statement of what she believed.
Yes, her faith.
Yeah, that she had never spoken aloud, but it's been very meaningful to you, and it will be to the family, and that's a great example. All right.
Mary Kaufman Early says, Diana, in some year of public education, had an assignment. She interviewed my parents. We still have that on cassette tape, and now it's somewhere in the cloud. One thing I remember is that my father's sense of humor coming through all in the way he always was.
So here again, to Trish's point, here's the value of a video or even an audio, because personality can't come through always in writing.
True.
Right? And so some sort of record of that is a tremendous, tremendous gift, because, well, I think we all can think of examples of people we've lost. Yes?
I was going to say, I want to end this on a smile.
Okay.
When my mom and dad met, my dad was 13 and my mom was 21. And they had 8 years difference. And she thought he was an obnoxious little boy when she first met him. And 4 years later, they got married, and they were married almost 63 years. And I'm the oldest of 4, so I know more about it, and I am writing everything down.
Yeah.
I don't have any kids, but I plan on my sister being here after me, so she's gonna take care of it.
So I'm going to end with this one last comment. We've got to close. Yesterday, I officiated a funeral for a trauma nurse who had worked in trauma at Methodist Hospital for 40 years, which is a remarkable career, right? And she actually is one of the people who helped start CareFlight here in Dallas. She worked, if you remember the 1985 plane crash at DFW, she worked that flight, the recovery, in the helicopter, had to burn her clothes afterward because they smelled like jet fuel, this kind of stuff. So I had this chapel full of people who were her family members and medical professionals. And I said, look, for people like me who just sort of play doctor off WebMD, we love to talk about, you know, the Hippocratic Oath that we know so much about, you know, first do no harm. And what I want to tell you today is that's not enough. It's not enough to do no harm. In life, we need to do something good. It's not just that we don't do something, but that we do something. And it's that doing good that we may not want to talk about, but needs to be remembered by those who come, because you will inspire them to do good. If they know the legacy that you've left, you will inspire them to do good. And that is how we sing the praise of God from one generation to the next. And that's my sermon for today. Thank you for all you're doing on that. Let's have a quick prayer, and we're going to let everyone out of here, okay? And we'll catch up on our other prayer concerns through email this week. Lord, thank you so much for our time together. Thank you for the wonderful stories we have to share with each other and with family and friends. And we pray that you would help us on this day of remembrance to give thanks for the generations who've come before us in this place and the generations that will still come. And may we be found faithful there. Through Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. Amen.